Kiev and Moscow's latest delegation meets and it showed a quote-unquote positive shift. That's the report that we're getting in at this point. But on ground, Russia's offensive in Ukraine has moved to a deadly phase. The assault is moving from the far east to the far west. This is the Lviv Oblast. A strategic region is the westernmost part of Ukraine bordering Poland. And this is the International Center for Peacekeeping and Security, which has now been bombed by Russia, killing 35 people. More than 100 people were pushed to the hospital recently. The center is just 20 kilometers away from the Polish border. According to local officials, Russian planes fired cruise missiles located over the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Fires at the base have now been fully extinguished and experts are examining the rubble. Ukraine and its NATO partners often use this as a base for training and exercises, which is why many foreign instructors work at this military base.
According to preliminary data, more than 30 missiles were fired. The air defense system worked. A number were shot down. The Yavoriv landfill came under attack.
The Ukrainian defense minister also confirmed the attack and urged action against Russian aggression. The minister also pleaded the West to close the airspace. The base covers an area of around 390 square kilometers and can accommodate around 2,000 people. It is not known how many people were on the site at the time of the attack. Photos from early February show army instructors of the United States and Ukraine taking part in drills. This is concerning for two major reasons. First, Lviv's position in the west of Ukraine has made the city a key hub. NATO is using the region for both humanitarian and military aid. With missiles hitting so close to the Polish border, NATO allies are also growing concerned that they have already stationed massive deployment of troops at all points bordering Ukraine. But now, the war is coming close to home.
Yesterday, in the speeches we heard from Russian TV presenters, which are essentially the Ruperts, the microphones of the Kremlin, the message was very, very clear that after Ukraine, Russia is not about to stop and that they are going to continue their invasion across the eastern bloc of countries to get back that big Russian empire they all dream about. Essentially, that is a declaration of war on European states and on NATO member states. The Russians are really pushing on the borders, and I think it's going to be very little time before they start attacking Poland.
For more on this, the Professor of International Politics, Scott Lucas, is now joining us live from London. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. My first question to you, I want to start by asking about what is now seeming to be a change in the Russian strategy. As we know, Russian air assault has widened to western part of Ukraine, and now, as we're saying, they're inching closer to the Polish border. What can you tell us about that?
This may sound strange to viewers, but these airstrikes near the Polish border are a sign of Russian weakness. Let me explain. The first weakness is that Russia has not been able to occupy most of Ukraine in the first 18 days of its invasion. And it was the hope of Vladimir Putin that his forces would very quickly occupy the capital, Kiev, other cities, and detain, even kill Ukraine's leaders. Now, that didn't happen. So Russia is now facing economic pressure, the sanctions, and it's facing increasing military and humanitarian aid by U.S., European countries, the international community to Ukraine, which will bolster its resistance. So that leads to the second sign of weakness, which is Russia has to try to attack these airfields in the west of Ukraine to try to stop those supplies. Now, they have had a notable strike today on this training center near Poland, but there are many other airfields in Ukraine. And I think Vladimir Putin is in a race against time. He's in a race against time as to whether he can move further on Ukraine's cities before Ukraine gets further support from the international community. And Russia just simply is not in a position economically or militarily to try to achieve victory.
Absolutely. Scott, just a follow-up to that, the United States and allies are set to escalate pressure on Russia, and they're responding essentially to a Russian attack near the Polish border. Washington has even said that it will defend every inch of NATO territory and increase assistance to Ukrainian fighters. Now, what does this mean essentially? Will there be any kind of US intervention or NATO intervention in this war?
Again, there will not be direct intervention by US forces, European forces, NATO forces. They don't want to risk a confrontation inside Ukraine with Russia, which would be the biggest war in Europe since 1945. Instead, they're doing two things. The first is around Ukraine, all those NATO countries, Poland, of course, but Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they're bolstering the NATO forces there, and they're sending out the warning that you just quoted, which is to Vladimir Putin, don't think about attacking any of these states, because then we will confront you directly, and we will hit you with everything we have. So it's a warning, it's a warning statement to Putin. Meanwhile, the second phase, which your viewers should watch, is support of the Ukrainian insurgency.
Right.
Resistance now, but insurgency. If Russia occupies much of the country, they still don't win, because the Ukraine government moves to the west of the country, and Western countries, the international community, will support that insurgency overtly with economic aid and probably covertly with more military assistance.
Right, Scott, thanks for those inputs. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.